think the question that we've been asking everybody here is about implementation. I think there's no doubt about the quality of the people we have here, the quality of their academic work, your own excellences, your record stands for itself. But the key thing is there going to be binding commitments and is there going to be a binding timetable? Because presumably that's the only way to actually make these aspirations into concrete fact.
Well, I think we are in a very peculiar moment in Africa. There is a certain degree of boldness. In my books, it's partly provoked by the enthusiasm that is coming from abroad, not inside Africa. Although the politicians have realized that something big is happening. And what is happening is basically the demographic curve is giving us a complete different story about Africa's future. We are very conscious that although the news about growth are there, growth is not producing quality in terms of equity, distribution, access, and people are asking for more. So I'm very hopeful that this boldness that is rather new, provoked in part by the fact that people now have access to information, which was not the case before, is going to shake up the tree a bit, and it's going to provoke a different type of sequencing, timetable, implementation plans, strategies. And remember, this is the year where we are commemorating 50 years of institutional Pan-African history. So people are very eager to know whether this is just going to be a party, a celebration, or is going to be about really building on the tradition that we really have to move on with an Africa that is much more capable of taking care of itself. Versions of Pan-Africanism, including the famous Monrovia and Casablanca groups. The Monrovia group being a bit more scared about full integration of the continent.
This is prior to OAU.
This is prior to OAU. And the Casablanca group being the progressive group of countries led by the likes of Kwame Nkrumah that wanted a full United States of Africa. And it took Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia the role to mediate between these two groups that led to the establishment of the AU in 1963. So as you can see, it's a debate that precedes the establishment of the OAU and will continue. There are different ways of looking into Pan-Africanism, but I think there is a dose of realism now, that people will not go for something that looks very attractive for philosophers, that looks very attractive for politicians, that are more linked to let's say, the tradition of opposition than tradition of power. Those in power know that this is now about regional integration. It's about intra-Africa trade zone. It's about, customs unions. It's about rules of origin. I mean, people have become much more technical and much more capable of seeing through the lens of what is needed for the real structural transformation of the continent. Well, the timetable of the African Union is 2017. It may be overambitious. They are basing this projection on the basis of blocks in existence being able to do their part. But as we know, the various regional economic communities in Africa are in different stages of progress. Some are working rather well. Some are making very fast progress, like the East African community, but others are really dragging and are not making a lot of progress, like the Union for the Arab Maghreb. So you have different types of speeds, and it is necessary for us to be cognizant of the fact that this is a very complicated affair. It's not a coincidence that the Doha round of the World Trade Organization has been under discussion for about 12 years. So it's not going to happen overnight. But the fact that there is this boldness, again I go to the issue of boldness, means that there is, at least from a political, from an institutional point of view, the desire to go fast. But of course, the technicians have to do also their part, and I think the difficulties are going to be precisely on the issues I have mentioned. You know, if you are a minister of finance in an African country and you are told that you have to relinquish some of the prerogatives that you have through your customs arrangements, you will be extremely hesitant, not necessarily because you are against regional integration, but because you will wonder, why am I going to lose control on the one thing that I know, customs, when there is so much going on that I don't really know, informal sector. And I think we have to be realistic and realize that most of the integration in Africa has been happening through the informal sector. What we have as a challenge is, as we move into regulatory systems, governance systems that are more sophisticated, and we want to include more and more people into the formal economy, this is going to change also the pattern of regional integration. That will become much more formalized. But until we have the full knowledge of the size of the informal economy, you will have a hard time convincing the ministers of finance. And I agree that when it comes to industrialization, we have immense possibilities of really transforming our reality. It does make too much sense, isn't it, that with a market as big as Africa, with 1 billion people, you are still importing toothpaste. So this is absolutely incredible, that you look into the light industry's potential and you see it's not happening because of markets being too small, being very difficult in terms of the regulatory systems, easiness of doing business, and so on. So we have to overcome those, and I think we are going in that direction. If you look just 10 years of progress, a lot has happened. But we are far from the mark, and I think one of the reasons we are far from the mark is because of this fragmentation of the economic realities in Africa. So regional integration is really an imperative, and I think we have to accelerate it. That's why, once again, having a goal as ambitious as 2017 may be somehow overambitious, but it points in direction that we have to accelerate.
I think when people talk about UNECA, certainly that I've spoken to, as I said, there's a lot of respect for the quality of the academic work that comes out, but it's, I suppose, at the sort of prescriptive ends. And I was using an example earlier on of, if a nutritionist looks at a population and discovers that they are obese and there's too much consumption of processed foods, for example, if they present a complex paper to them, it is really of less utility than saying something simple like eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, or something like that. Is there more? I mean, so the African mining vision, for example, seems to be, I write a lot about mining, and looking at the African mining vision, and specifically the action plan, seems to be a really strong attempt to try and produce tangible goals to a tangible timetable. Can we expect more of that sort of thing in the future?
I hope so, because we are specializing much more in our role as a think tank that is anchored in real policy recommendations. And policy recommendations means you are not necessarily prescriptive. In fact, I'm a bit against being prescriptive, but it also means you have to be a bit more concrete. And a lot of what we have produced in the past was too generic, because it was based on research that is out there, that is used by ECA, partly done by ECA, very good capacity to package and to formulate policy proposals, but we need to go beyond that. We need also original research, and some of the original research is much more difficult to do if you are doing it alone. So you need to work with a community of people that are in the same, basically, business. One of the problems that we have faced in the past is that although we had a very good reach to governments and a very extensive reach to academia, we were very poor in reaching out to the private sector.
It's funny you say that. I was lucky enough to be at the ADF, the African Development Forum conference in Addis in October, and it being focused on mining was of particular interest to me. But one of the things I noticed was we're talking about minerals and harnessing mineral rents. At the same time, the mining industry is very anxious about resource nationalism and building a social compact to ensure that they can maintain confidence and realise their investments. And yet, on the other hand, there was the one initiative with the Australian AID with the minerals training initiative, which I thought was really good news. But on the other hand, there seemed to be very little private sector involvement. And I noticed this time round we have obviously a much larger representatives from the private sector. Obviously, Aliko Dangote, figures such as that, Mo Ibrahim, and so on are coming along. Is this part of an effort to try and engage the private sector?
Definitely, it is very deliberate, and we hope to be able to do much more. You will see, for instance, that we are organizing an important side event for the World Economic Forum in Cape Town on private equity. So I'm trying really to make sure that ECA becomes much more engaged with the private sector.
Wonderful. Mr. Lopes, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for speaking to RKTV. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.